Hello again, plant friends, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Sarah, and today we are talking about a Hoya that I had a surprisingly hard time getting a hold of. If you are new here, welcome. If you've been around for a while, thanks so much for coming back and joining me for another happy Hoya days. So today's Hoya is one, like I mentioned, that I had a surprisingly hard time getting a hold of. Not because it's particularly uncommon or rare or hard to get a hold of, I just happen to have a whole lot of adventures trying to get a hold of this Hoya. And that Hoya is the Hoya Kentiana Variegata. So, as you can see here, just beautiful variegated leaves. It's got the internal variegation as opposed to the albo marginata, which is along the outside. And it gets a little bit of that lovely pink or maroon color to it as it kind of gets a little sun-stressed. So just a gorgeous Hoya, and one that I'd had my eye on for a while. So if you've been around my channel for a while, you know that I initially ordered or tried to order this Hoya off of Hertz and ended up with a completely different Hoya. I did in fact end up with a Hoya shepherdi, which looks very similar but has longer leaves and looks more like a green bean. I'll link to my Hoya shepherdi Happy Hoya Days so that you can check that out. Now, in spite of it not in fact being variegated, the two Hoyas, shepherdi and Kentiana, actually do look quite similar, so it wasn't a huge deal, and it was one I didn't already have, so I just proceeded to order another cutting of a Hoya Kentiana Variegata from a more reputable source. Unfortunately, being in Colorado, that shipment actually ended up getting caught in a little bit of colder weather, and about half of those Hoyas didn't survive, with the Kentiana being one of them. It's a very delicate, kind of more fragile Hoya, and so it just didn't make the trip and it didn't survive. Lucky for me, a wonderful subscriber who also happens to live in the Colorado area sent me a cutting of theirs, and they actually rooted theirs up in leca. So I've just left it in leca, and it's been doing fantastically. I finally actually have an established Hoya Kentiana Variegata. So like I said, this one I actually have growing in leca, partially because it just happened to come to me already having been rooted in leca, but I do find that this one actually grows quite well in the leca. From what I've seen about the Kentiana and its close, almost twin, the Hoya-days, they both kind of like a little bit higher light, so this one is definitely one that gets priority towards a window or under my grow lights or something like that. Speaking of the Hoya-days, that's another, there's a lot of these kind of like long green, I think of them as like green bean shaped leaved Hoyas, and the Hoya-days, especially the Hoya-days Variegata, looks very, very similar to this. So just something to be aware of, that you might see them being sold as each other or might in fact receive one or the other. They get mislabeled quite a bit. I will keep referring to this one as a Kentiana because that is what it was sold to me as, and from what I've seen online, I did see a couple people mention that the Kentiana actually has these pink stems. I don't know if you guys can see that, but they're pinker stems, more like maybe the Queen or the Crimson Princess or things like that have like a pink stem to them, and then the green and white leaves. And so that was one that I saw a couple people said that was a tell that it was a Kentiana, and then the Hoya-days has more of a green stem to it. I can't 100% verify that that is in fact true, but like I said, I did see that a couple different places online, so maybe that's a way that you can tell the difference between the two of them. As far as care of the Hoya Kentiana Variegata, or even just the Hoya Kentiana, it is a little bit more, like I said, a delicate Hoya, especially in shipping. I just find that it struggles a little bit in shipping. So just be aware of shipping times and weather and things like that if you're trying to have a Hoya Kentiana shipped to you. I'd also say that the better established that plant is, the better chance you're gonna have. Try not to go for the 2 or 4 leaf cuttings, just because, like I said, they are a little bit delicate, a little bit fragile, so that will give you a little extra breathing room. However, once this Hoya was here and started kind of getting established, I've found that it's been a pleasantly easy to care for Hoya. Most of my Hoyas that are in leca tend to be a little bit easier care. They're not too finicky, and the Kentiana has been no exception. Like I said, the one thing that I did see is that it does like a little bit more light, so I do try to give it preferential treatment for light, as opposed to some of my other Hoyas that I know I can get away with, maybe moving them back from the window a little bit further. You'll also want to give it preferential light treatment if you do want that kind of lovely pink sunburn, sun-stressed look, just being careful not to actually burn your plant, but just to gently sun stress it. This Hoya is native to the Philippines, so it does prefer a little bit higher humidity, but I haven't noticed anything as far as it not doing well if it doesn't get more than just kind of my ambient 40% humidity that I usually have in this room. The flowers on this Hoya are a lovely like pinkish burgundy, somewhere kind of in the middle. As usual, if I can find a picture that I can use, I'll try to insert it somewhere here in the frame. And this particular Hoya does love to kind of vine over, so just be aware you might want to put it in a place where you can let it hang or drape over something as it starts to grow. As far as getting a hold of this particular Hoya, I don't think it's terribly hard. I've seen some well-established plants for in the $30 to $40 range plus shipping. So I think this Hoya is more of a matter of finding it in stock where you prefer to buy it from, whether you want to get it shipped or buy it locally. Overall, a beautiful Hoya and a pretty easy to care for Hoya, so definitely one I'd recommend if you are starting to move out of that beginner Hoya range and just beginning to expand your collection. And I think that does it for the Hoya Kentiana Variegata. Thank you guys so much for joining me for today's Hoya, and I will see you in a couple of days with another Hoya. Bye.